Energy. It is all around us, both seen and unseen. It affects all the lives within humanity, our great planet Earth, and the entire universe. It is a conscious cosmic matrix, an ever-evolving cycle, creating, breaking down, and recreating. This is Connected with your host, Andrea Dragonfly. Andrea tells us that energy is the foundation of our human experience, intrinsically affecting every facet of our lives, our perceptions, choices, and actions, as well as the challenges, opportunities, and people we attract. So now, please welcome the host of Connected, Andrea Dragonfly.
Hey there. Happy fall season. Welcome to the show Connected. I am your host, Andrea Dragonfly. We have a very interesting topic today, which is all about ancestral attachments, curses versus demonic possessions. So it's going to get pretty interesting as the conversation unfolds. I do want to remind everybody that this is a live show. So if you have questions, we have the phone number at the top of the screen, and you're welcome to either call in or you are welcome to message through the Facebook messaging site, and I can get the questions there. So if there's anything that's coming up and you have questions, go ahead and bring them forward this evening. I'll do my very best to be able to answer them as they come through. And just kind of getting into the season. So we have just transitioned from summer into fall. And through the show, we're transitioning through kind of like talking about the first half of the show was really about looking at ourselves and our relationship to our world, to our experiences of the everyday things, to our the people that are in our lives, sometimes the events that bring us there through karma. And then, also looking at how even all of this plays out within our families, which is where we have arrived now. But I've also been looking at our energy fields, like what are we feeling throughout all of these earlier shows? Is like getting in touch with our own feelings and our own relationship to the world around us. And so this is more of me focusing on the seen. And again, the show is about seen and unseen energies. So we're now kind of shifting into more, probably for the rest of our time together, we're going to be really looking at unseen energies, creating those relationships, or recognizing when we're at the effect of these types of energies without even knowing about it. And what can we do about those things? Of course, everything will be woven together because everything's connected. And so even in earlier shows, I said, oh, we're going to talk about that. We're still going to talk about that because everything is connected. And what I do want to say is that this topic that we're getting into, for many people, it can be very uncomfortable. Some people don't necessarily know how they feel about dark energy and whether it's real, whether it's not real, and by all means, wherever you're at with that is perfectly good for where you need to be. This is a conversation that absolutely is coming forward through what's happening in the current day and what has been part of our human existence since the beginning of time. And so it is written in many different areas in ancient texts from different cultures and civilizations from time immemorable. And so we're going to, I'm going to bring in the conversation. And again, it's always something for you to try on, see how you feel with it. How does it, how does it inform you? And every person is going to have their own angle of talking about these things. And so this is, of course, coming from my perspective, coming from my angle. And I like to keep it as open as possible. So find other people talking about these things. What are they saying? We're all going to have different experiences around these subjects. I also want to just kind of do a brief intro as to how I even came into working with dark energy. And I'm going to call it dark energy. And now it's nuanced. And I don't want to just, have people think of dark as bad, because dark isn't bad. Aspects of the darkness, which many people are connected to, um, this is where our fears can live. This is where a lot of these kind of energies can hide out in the shadows, right? And then we have light energy. And so light energy can be like bright light, but it also can be weightless, as in it's light energy where it has no weight, and it's very, ascended energies that move through the frequencies of energy throughout the cosmos. Now, also, you might hear me talk about dense energy. So light can be weightless, and it can also, on the opposite side of that, there's density, and density brings us closer into our three-dimensional life experience, which is what we're all doing here in these human bodies, right? And so I do want to remind everybody, wherever you're at and however you want to see it, I like to say, and many people besides myself are saying this, is that we are spiritual beings having a human experience, because we're far more than what and who we are in these incarnations. I've been talking about multiple lifetimes and how we have these different incarnations, and every incarnation is going to bring something different for our greater growth, our greater spiritual evolution. So I'm going to say that I had no idea that my path would take me to working with dense and dark energies. However, 20 years ago, I was just trying to figure out exactly when. You know what? I'm going to even take it back 30 years ago. Of course, I knew they existed. Of course, I knew scenarios. And I even had my own where I had my very first soul loss. And again, I'm going to be talking about these conversations, and I will get into more detail as the shows go along. So 30 years ago, it first came into my field, knowing that, these are things that exist, and I'm experiencing something for the very first time. And I'll share that story at another time, because I don't want to dive into all of the nitty gritties of the stories. Of course, there'll be time for that. And then another 10 years later, I'm connected to a really dear friend of mine who I hadn't seen in a long time. And he had a very dark energy attachment. And so it brought it forward, and he and I talked a lot, and I was already well on my spiritual journey at that time, knowing that they existed, but not necessarily knowing how to work with them or remove them. So when I say work with them, I am specifically I work for the light, I work for divinity, I work in the highest good for all, and for the freedom, free will, and choice of each human being, right? So each free soul, spirit. So when I work with dark energy, I'm really looking at freeing that person from that dark energy. And even so, one of my Lakota shaman teacher from years back said that shamans are like spirit lawyers, if you want to put it like in some sort of reference to the way we live out our 3D world, in that they negotiate for that person's soul. And again, that soul is the navigation device that I've been talking about in so many of the different shows, because the spirit is that everlasting part of us. It's the eternal part of us, right? It's the infinite part of us, and we grow that spirit through our experiences, and the soul is what brings us to those experiences. And so when we're working with negotiating with darker and dense energies, we're negotiating the soul, and sometimes there's soul losses, and sometimes there's certain types of things that need to happen in order to actually free a person from that type of dark, dense attachment. So this is what's leading us into our conversation tonight, is that even with this, if we're looking at lineage, and we're looking at, and I am going to do a little bit of review, but if we're looking at lineage, oftentimes we can break the cycle within ourselves, but it doesn't necessarily mean we free all of our ancestors at the same time either. However, we do help liberate them on certain levels of energy. We all are our own healer. We all are responsible for our own life journey. And really, it always comes down to, and I cannot say this enough, and I'm going to say it more and more every time we get together, is that the spiritual process, the journey, is about free will, choice, and freedom. And it's about how we align ourselves with those choices. And so, oftentimes, in order for us to learn a lesson, we have to be stuck in a loop or have to be kind of, cycling in a pattern of a disempowerment, situation over and over and over again until we make a different choice. That's the freedom, that's the free will, that's the choice that is available to us. Now, if we're stuck into something, and as we go into curses and demonic possessions, we can make the choice of our healing for ourselves. We can also possibly do it for our children. However, our siblings or our parents will have to make that choice for themselves. But ultimately, even if we do it for our children still, depending on what age they are, if they've hit puberty and are coming into their adulthood or well into their adulthood, then they have to actually come to it on their own free will, choice, and freedom. But if you recognize that maybe you have a curse or a demonic possession within your lineage and your children are not quite through puberty or younger then you actually can claim it for them because they're little, and you can actually, as their guardian, claim it for them, freeing them from the pattern that ensues within the process, within the, you can call it karma, or just within the curse or the possession. So that's just some kind of foundational ways in which this energy and energy healing works, is that we have to make a choice for ourselves. And then there's people like myself that can facilitate that process of the healing. And it's very complex because everything is slightly different. Every family is going to have a different family dynamic. So each family and each person within the family is going to have a unique set of energy specifics that are going to be addressed. Now, when we're looking at just review from last week, we were looking at lineage wounds versus a lineage curse. And I was talking about how lineage wounds is really about a person's experience. That person, we're going to talk about the original family member. So let's just use great grandfather or great grandmother. However, it's not sexist anyway. So using one of the great grandparents, they have an experience where they've experienced maybe some sort of intense trauma. And oftentimes with that trauma, there can be a soul loss. And it really becomes disempowering. And so it becomes this process in which disconnects them from probably whatever it is that they want most deeply within their family unit. Sometimes it can be love, it can be connection, it can be kindness and generosity, it can be, many different things. Every family is going to have something different. Sometimes there's going to be just a pattern of, it's a pattern of disempowerment. And so it just kind of moves through each of the family members. And then the families can never really feel connected to one another. And it can look many different ways. And so, again, I'm sorry for not bringing out all the details to that. But again, certain types of abuses can unfold, certain types of, areas of disempowerment, of self-sacrifice, of all these different parts and pieces begin to play out within the family. And the family starts to take those energies on because that healing really wants to happen within the lineage. But again, it comes from experience. So that experience, and somebody else could have done it to them, but it wasn't with a magical background, right? And this is what we're going to be talking about when we get into curses. This is just the everyday cruelty of humanity, probably, right? So when I say probably, I just mean that, not all traumas are necessarily the cruelty of humanity, but I mean, we're just looking at war. We're looking at self-sacrificing. We're looking at, sometimes there is this, disempowerment of as a woman, even standing strong and claiming one's own and claiming one's worth, right? And what one deserves to be treated well. All sorts of different ways in which that dynamic can play out. So we're going to take a very quick break. And when we get back, we're going to look at the family lineage versus curses. And we're going to move into demonic possessions. And again, I just want to remind everybody that there is that call number at the top of the screen. If you do have questions and you want to be a call in, love to have you. And otherwise, you can text a message in as well. So we'll see you back here in 2 minutes.
What if there were a super tiny device that could diagnose the brain and is smaller than a single human hair? What if you could see inside the brain to help an epilepsy patient during surgery or to help the fight against Parkinson's disease? Dr. Patricia Broderick is proud to announce the Broderick Probe, a biomedical and electronic breakthrough. Imagine a probe to help with the understanding and potential cure of brain-related diseases. To learn more, listen live to the Easy Sense radio show with host Dr. Broderick, Wednesdays 7 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave Media Network and TuneIn Radio. And to help support the Broderick Foundation, please go to EasySense.com and learn how, with your help, we can fight these horrific brain disorders. That's EasySense.com to learn more and help support the Broderick Foundation. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness, Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them. Rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies. Find settings that allow them to be the most productive and track their progress towards accomplishing goals. Listen to John Hawkins' My Strategy, Saturdays, 1 p.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio.
Welcome back. So we are looking at lineage wounds versus curses that are carried down through the lineage, the family ancestry. And again, just to clarify one more time, lineage wound is an experience that has happened, that has created a disempowerment within the family member. That disempowerment was so severe that it kind of carries forth generation through generation. And sometimes, again, it's around disconnecting from usually that which we want the most. So it's going to be our own personal empowerment. So every family is going to have a different dynamic to that. Now, when we look at curses are very different. And the difference is, again, lineage wound comes from an experience where the curse actually is coming from a person, a magical person, the cursor. And so this could be a sorcerer, it could be a bruja in different cultures, it can be a priest, priestess in different cultures. There's many different names to a person who works with what we could call black magic. Now, with black magic, what's happening is that I'm going to use the word the cursor. So the person is, they're creating an energy and they're binding it and they're putting it into action. And it's created and directed towards a person and possibly a family and lineage, usually using many different types of methods. Now, there are so many different types of cultures, and each culture is going to have different ways and methods in which they cast curses on others. So it can be very varied, right? So there can be many different ways in which this happens. It's always important to try to find out, you know, um, what culture it might come from. And so last week I even talked about a client of mine and how it was more of a African tribal religion culture, which came from slavery, which came from the slaves who were cruelly punished. Um, and then they kind of, you know, retaliated with putting a curse on a family. Now, many things, I mean, curses can look many, many different ways. So it's not like, oh, this is what it's going to look like. But usually, what it's going to do is it's going to affect the mundane living or just the everyday living of the family. So it's going to look, can look very, can look very many different ways, as I had mentioned before. Yet, what I'm looking at some of my notes just so I can keep me on keep me on the path here. So it really all depends on, why a person was cursed, where, when, and by whom, right? So we're looking at different ways as to, well, what's the whole reason? Why did this happen? And so again, usually somebody did something. And usually a curse is placed on somebody, and they come again from different traditions, different beliefs. And because that the world has been dominated by the Abrahamic religions of Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, we don't really talk about this because it's not part of that tradition. We we barely look at that, or we don't look at it at all. We just really don't look at it as curses. I mean, of course, we know some demonic possessions, and we'll get into that towards the end of the show here. But we've been far removed. And back in the day, we were so much closer to living off the land. We had relationship with the land. I'm not saying the land is bad by any means. The land has amazing allies, great benevolent allies. And so again, I want to just differentiate. We have benevolent, which is good. It's helpful. They're the ones that are going to help us along, heal us, do all these different things in our greatest interest of our freedom, free will, and choice, like I was talking about before. Malevolent beings are the unhelpful ones. They're the tricksters. They're the ones that are harmful and often into like creating cycles of destruction. Whereas the benevolent beings help with creation. So they're different, we can look at them in a dualistic way, but they're working on the opposite spectrum of creation, healing, destruction, hurting kind of energies. And I always want to say that language is powerful, and there's so many other ways we can also articulate this because, there's energy and life is so complex, right? So looking at this, but when we were living closer to nature, we had relationships with energy. We had relationships with our food, our plants, our animals, even if we were farming or whatnot, right? We had relationships with the soil and the rocks and all of that. And we're going to talk about those as our allies in the 3D world, in our human experience, and how they still are our allies, but we're not really connecting to them as much as we once did. So again, when we're looking at, working with people who have cursed somebody else, they're using the relationships that they've built. And sometimes these relationships are with these darker malevolent energies, these harmful energies, hurtful, unhelpful, that are going to actually sabotage people's lives in a myriad of different ways. And so I'm just going to kind of run through many ways curses can look within a family's lineage even. because what's happening is that it lives within the energetic of the bloodline. So a person marrying into the lineage isn't going to be at the direct effect of the curse, but they're going to be indirectly involved because their partner is directly at the effect of the curse. And so this is where people's lives fall apart, and they can fall apart in weird ways. Like, everything from, losing jobs or not ever really being able to get the job, or getting the job and, getting fired and having that, repetitive nature. You can also have lots of relationship problems where the unity of the couple can't stay together, and then maybe there's multiple partners or whatever, or they find another person who matches their energy level. If their energy level is, living along the lines of um, fear, worry, anger, pain, suffering, and they find another partner who has those same energy affinities, they can live miserably together, right? So they can probably get along that way. But if you're not energetically aligned, your relationship isn't going to last. And possibly that partner might come from another family that could have a curse, or could have some other energetic that's living throughout their family lineage. So it can get complicated. We can also have, people who are targeted in different ways. And so even legal matters, or presumed guilty when they're innocent. And so the troublemakers, those who are always being kind of called out and seen in a light that the community doesn't necessarily embrace, right? So there's those. There can be weird illnesses that go through the family. Sometimes there can just be constant weird illnesses. Sometimes these illnesses can't even be kind of like diagnosed, even because it's just too elusive to understand. But also times cancers. This is where the cancers can really come in, because these curses can activate the different parts of our body systems, and invoke a cancers throughout the family lineage. So there's also a series of accidents, and so the family can be very accident prone. There's all sorts of things, from freak accidents to even like living in the floodplains, or buildings collapsing, their homes collapsing on them, or even like head-on collisions with when you don't even know that, where you don't even see the person in front of you. So like these weird things are happening. There can also be lots of different types of like physical assaults, sexual assaults, verbal, engagements that are, could be seen as an assault in some way. And so this definitely can come through the lineage and through the family members, all in its unique own weird way. Sometimes the family or the person in particular. Now, again, I'm talking about the family because we're talking about family lineage, but really this, like some of the people within the family lineage might have more of this than others. So even animal attacks, or animals, growl or bite or attack them or are afraid of them, right? It could even end within like creating a sterility within the family's reproductive line, so that the family can't produce offspring. So that's other, a way that can look. It can put people into like kind of intense poverty, or even homelessness. It can certainly work on mental health in many different ways. And so it could bring people to just being crazy, and people like, oh my God, that person's mad, or insanity, really living into alternate states of reality that the regular world does not abide by, And so that can also be parts of that. And then also curses can lead to different types of death. Maybe, for example, maybe there's somebody within the masculine lineage line. And I was even looking at this in my own family, because my father was a Detroit police officer, and it was like, he died at 68. And my uncle died at 68, and my grandfather died at 68. And they were all men of power in some way. And it's like, oh, do we have a curse that all the men who have held some form of power, even if it's, police, law officer, business, whatnot, that they die at the age of 68. So this is something to look into, to say, okay, well, what about my brother? What about my nephew? And is this only on my bloodline of my the masculine side, or does this even go down to my own son, right? So there's questions in the way you have to look into how this energy can flow through the lineage, through the different generations. So they can be wide ranging, and they can be energetically devastating to the family. And so it's important also to be like, when looking at, hey, this is a pattern throughout my family. Everybody seems to be disempowered in their own way. And you're looking at aunts, uncles, cousins, things like that. So it's like, okay, there's something here, because that's not normal. And when a curse is put on a person or a family lineage, the person who put the curse on them actually becomes karmically tied to that family or that person. And so it really depends. And again, whenever we're working with energy, and we're working with energy on this kind of level, and by all means, I'm not going to be here teaching anybody how to do this kind of stuff. I am just trying to let you know that this is the kind of stuff that if you do and you don't know really what you're doing, you got to be careful, because this is the stuff that when we put it out there, it comes back at us threefold, sevenfold, tenfold, depending on the energy, right? So when, some of the magical schools, there's the threefold law. That is like, whatever you put out there, whether it's positive or negative, it's going to come back you at 3 times the power. And so when cursors put curses on people, if they're very skilled at their craft, let's just use that word, then they can actually have the rebound hit somebody else and not them. So they know what they're doing. And then a person who's actually trying to help that person at the effect of the curse remove it, we got to be very careful not to send the curse back to the cursor. We got to get rid of it all together, because then we can then put ourselves into harm's way as well. And so it can get very complicated. And if there's more than one person putting a curse on a person or a family, then it becomes very entangled. It can take years to untangle these different parts and pieces, because a curse can actually be done, like I said, in many different ways. It can be seasonal, like at the turn of every season, something like a layer could be added to the family or to the person that creates a heavier, more like unbearable like toll a person's carrying, right? Or it can work in these different ways. Usually when a person puts a curse on a person or a family, they put it in this bound action and they set it into action, and then usually they just let it do its thing. And again, this is usually done through some sort of magical act. It's casting a certain type of cursed spell, so to speak. Some people use the word ritual, but I work with the word ritual in a much different way. Ritual is habitual. It's something that we do regularly. So unless that person does it regularly, maybe it's a ritual for them. I don't know. I don't use that language, but they're really actually doing a magical act of intention, which is why it's different between between a lineage wound and an actual curse. Okay, we're going to dive deeper into this after we come back from this next break. So take 2, and I'll see you back here. Thanks.
Did you know that your beliefs create your entire reality, but it's the subconscious beliefs that do most of the creating? Belief shifter and life coach Shiraz can help you identify those limiting beliefs and eliminate them, often in a single session.
Like, it was almost instant. Like, I had relief right away.
Creating better health, relationships, careers, and finances. Let Shiraz help you step out of safety and into awareness.
Definitely something's happening. It's like a flow inside. It feels good.
Whether in person or online, Shiraz provides personal coaching, belief shifting. Visit Shiraz at energeticmagic.com or call 416-529-7429. Energetic Magic on the BBM Global Network, Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern. Find your greater happiness. Be well. Be aware. Be magical.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of the Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on the Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Welcome back. Just a friendly reminder that there is that phone number at the top of the screen, or you can send me a comment on Facebook if you have any questions, and or you have something that you want me to clarify or even cover. So, you're welcome to bring your questions forward. Looking at curses as we are talking, I talked about how the curses, when the cursor, the person who is putting this on another person or lineage, there is, really what it's doing is it's shifting the energetic trajectory of that person's life. Now, some people can call this fate. So we're looking at the fate pattern. Now, in general, the way that I like to talk about fate is that if we do nothing in life, where life takes us is fate. Life is driving the fate train. It's taking us to all the different places or whatever. And it's affecting us according to whatever's going to be coming at us, right? So fate is where we don't have control of our lives, where life is controlling our life. So I see that as fate. Now, destiny, on the other hand, is where we take control of our lives. It's where we decide that says, no more, I don't want this. I want to change the trajectory, the path of where I'm going. I don't want to be carrying all of this yucky energy, disempowering energy with me anymore. I'm going to find certain people who are going to help me overcome this. I'm going to dream my biggest life for myself. I'm going to take chances and risks that are outside of the box of what my family or anybody before me, I'm going to dream my big dream and make it happen. That's our destiny. And they do say that everybody has a fate. When I say they, the shamans of South America, the Kyoto, say that everybody has a fate. Not everybody has a destiny, because not everybody is conscious that they are creating their destiny. Now, with the expansion of consciousness that's been happening over since 2008, 2012, the world is shifting. We've been having this mass awakening. More and more people are aware that they get to create their destiny, right? So when a curse is put on, it really is completely shifting, altering the energetic course of that person and their family, meaning that their true original karma, family karma, is now going to be kind of riddled with extra traps and extra, disempowering pieces that come along with that, where that it wasn't there originally. Now, how, again, do we clear ourselves of these? These are something that you want to take to a person who really knows what they're doing. And again, not every person is going to know how to work with every different person's curse, because we all have our own toolboxes. We all know, when I say we all, I'm talking about people who work with dark, dense energies, curses, demonic possessions, things like that. Like we have our training, we have our knowledge, we have what we know. And if it's outside of what we know, it's dangerous to actually try to take on something that we don't really know all the different entrapments that go along with it. So it's like, finding a team that can really work to really address what it is, because there's lots of different cultures, lots of different ways things can show up. Now we're going to move into demonic possession. And this is a very unique and different piece as well. It can absolutely be similar or look similarly to a curse. And I actually have had both. I've worked with families, individuals who come from families with curses and demonic possessions. Now, I do want to say, even with curses, it's not like I see this very often. It's not like, oh my God, everybody's got one, because we don't. That's not true. But people do have them, and I want to make that clear. They do exist, and so that very much is true. So the best thing you want to do is you want to connect with an energy worker practitioner like myself, who is able to look to see, okay, where is this coming from? Is this a lineage wound? Is this a curse? Is this a demonic possession? There's lots of things to look at, and so there's ways to figure out exactly where it all comes from, roots and stuff like that, the roots of it. Now, demonic possession is unique because this is where the original family member has been seeking power, control, something. Could be fame, success, something for themselves, and they more or less make a deal with the devil. That is real. That is true. We even hear about it in different types of things on the television. So and so, the music, person, they sold their soul to the devil, and they became incredibly famous, and then they died early, or whatever that is, right? But I want to talk about this because this can very much become a lineage piece. Now, people can certainly have their individual one-on-one, deals with the devil. But when it comes to certain types of groups, and I'm going to talk about these groups because this is actually, this can happen consciously or unconsciously, where this person makes this deal with the dark side. And the dark side is cunning. It's slippery. It's tricky. It's tempting. It can make a person say, oh yeah, I want that. And the cost isn't that much. Like, oh, you're just going to have to, well, we'll still skin you. Give me your firstborn child, right? It's so funny that just came out. Oh, yeah, you do a little bit of honoring for me, and I'll give you whatever you want. Now, this is very much, I see this with my clients, especially in religious groups. In religious groups with people who are leading churches, missions, congregations of different types. And I know that I don't have the language for all the different types, but these can be missionaries. These can be the little small town where, it's the preacher kind of a thing. And there's a power there. Now, here's the thing. It's a perceived power. And I'm going to be talking about this. I'm going to say this, but this is going to go for the list of other groups that follow behind religion. Because religion, I talked many episodes about an ahrimanic force and a luciferic force. That ahrimanic force is a judgment based on what one person believes that everybody else should be doing, which takes away the true path of the spiritual ascension, or the spiritual awakening, or the spiritual expansion. Because the spiritual expansion is free will, freedom, choice upon one's own learning, right? That's huge. That's really important to get. But when other people are saying, no, you got to do this is where dogma comes in. Dogma, if you're being told to do something in a very certain way, that is the antithesis of the spiritual expansion, of elevating, of rising, of ascending into a higher, more conscious, expanded being. Because you're at the effect of somebody else's power, control, and manipulation. And now I was about to say that it's a perceived power, because when a person makes that deal with the devil, let's just say, they've lost all their power. Now the power goes to the devil, the demon, the dark force, the dark entity, the malevolent energy. But they are left with control and manipulation, but that power begins to kind of be sieved out of them. It gets sucked out of them. And then what else ensues is all sorts of horrible things for the family. Greed. Again, I talked about why one might want to do that. So again, so we talked about religion. Again, there's politics. And right now we look at the politics and we look at whatever's happening on YouTube, or which is how I watch sometimes some of the politics. And it's like, holy shit, excuse my language, but how dense of a force is attached to that person? You know what I mean? Because again, it comes down to power, control, manipulation. If somebody's trying to take the power away from somebody, trying to take it away from free will choice and that person's freedom, then they are at the effect of something. I'm not saying that all of them are going to be at the effect of a dark demon, dark force, but some of them have made these deals, and it can go through the family lineage. Some of them also are business, multi-billion-dollar businesses. They may have also made some sort of deal in their business practice. They don't take care of their employees. They pillage and rape the earth for minerals at all costs, not caring about the environment. Their business practices are very anti community, or helping their workers have better lives, or whatever. They're taking advantage of people. So we can see it within certain types of businesses. We see it within the mafia, with gangs, cartels, those types of energies, those groups where they're running drugs and guns and humans, sex trafficking, all of that. So those also are going to have people who are deeply immersed in that and have wanted to be powerful in those places, could very well have created that, and it could become a lineage piece. And then finally, again, I kind of started with this, I'm ending with this, it's around fame. And fame is, we can talk about musicians, we can talk about actors and actresses, we can talk about how there's lots of different ways a person can, get fame, infamy in some way, right? And so this again is that deal that says, oh, if I can just have this, the cost, oh, it'll be okay, but then the cost, the way it comes through is that there's usually a lot of, I'm just going to say, like, the family's experience and a huge amount of cruelty. So even the families that I've worked with, there was an incredible amount of physical violence, of rape, of incest, even murder within the family lineage, of grandfather to son, or father to son. Within this one family, it was the grandfather to the uncle. So we're looking at how the environment of one who chooses that becomes really kind of like this very unhealthy, almost torturous environment, where there's an immeasurable amount of fear, because there are people who are wielding that power, that control, that manipulation, even on their own family line. So that looks different. So that's going to be a lot more pain and suffering is coming with that demonic force, whereas life's absolute disempowerments are coming with that curse. Doesn't mean that there's some interchange along the way, because there is. Not everything is very, fine line, like demarcated so clearly. There's a lot of kind of things that can go both ways. And so it's really important to kind of look at all of that. So these are just some ways for us to look at this. And of course, murder is a big thing. Usually when a person has sold their soul to the devil and it goes through, the lineage line, the family's wrapped up in murder in different kinds of ways. And so whether it's even within the family line or they're murdering other people, but there's a huge hardship. Let's talk about karma. Demonic possessions, again, is it's one of those pieces that you can free yourself from the family lineage, but some of your siblings, if you're an adult, your siblings have to choose that for themselves too, because we are the healer of our own life. We're the one that's getting off the fate train and jumping on the destiny train and saying, no more. I'm going to change the trajectory of my life. I'm going to change it for my children. I'm going to get my children on board. I'm going to learn about this and share it with my children if you have children, or remove my children from this, because it's called bad blood, right? So we talk about bad blood, and we talk about this in many different ways, but we don't really necessarily understand, what does that really mean? What does bad blood really mean? Oh, it lives in the lineage. Sure. And what else? Why? Why does it live in the lineage? What's the actual energy that might be at the core root of that bad blood? So that's definitely something to consider, to look into. So we're going to take a quick break, our last break of the evening, and then we get back, we're going to do a little connection. So stick with me. I'll see you back here in 2.
What if there were a super tiny device that could diagnose the brain and is smaller than a single human hair? What if you could see inside the brain to help an epilepsy patient during surgery, or to help the fight against Parkinson's disease? Dr. Patricia Broderick is proud to announce the Broderick Probe, a biomedical and electronic breakthrough. Imagine a probe to help with the understanding and potential cure of brain-related diseases. To learn more, listen live to the Easy Sense radio show with host Dr. Broderick, Wednesdays 7 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave Media Network and TuneIn Radio. And to help support the Broderick Foundation, please go to EasySense.com and learn how, with your help, we can fight these horrific brain disorders. That's EasySense.com to learn more and help support the Broderick Foundation. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness, Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals. Listen to John Hawkins' My Strategy, Saturdays, 1 p.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio.
Welcome back. So we are wrapping up tonight's show. And I did get a comment today, and so I do want to invite the person who sent me the comment, if you want to reach out and connect with me in person, please do. I encourage your communication. This is definitely something that I'm not going to be able to talk about, and it's really just kind of like an understanding that a person, this person in particular, is feels that they have felt like maybe black magic was done to them by their own family member and cursed by the same. And then also just kind of looking at, they also call themselves Christian, right? And so this is the really big thing about what's happening in the world, is that many people who call themselves something may not be that at all, right? And so we want to find out, what's the energy. I mean, a true let's just talk about Christ for just a quick second, because Christ is about unconditional love, compassion, and forgiveness. Christ recognizes, and Christ is a powerful energy being. There's no gender to Christ. Christ isn't masculine. It came through Jesus, which is what we call Jesus Christ. But it's the higher harmonic of love, spiritual healing, of compassion, of forgiveness, right? And so this is part of what we're here to learn as humans. How do we move closer to that? How do we make those choices more and more, instead of hurting and harming other people along the way, right? And so this is that bigger process of how do we begin to expand ourselves consciously and become more spiritualized in the process. Now, we only have just a few minutes left, and I'm going to invite you. We don't have a whole time for like, a little inner meditation, but I'm going to invite you to think about whether this exists within your own family. Like I just got this comment tonight. If it doesn't exist, if a curse or demonic possession doesn't exist within your own family, is there a family that you know that maybe this might be happening to them? Right? And if there's nobody that you can think of that you are personally connected to, then I invite you just to connect into all of those families that are out there that are experiencing this type of lineage curse or even a lineage demonic possession. And this is where we begin to bring that Christed energy in, that unconditional love, that compassion. And again, this is the theme of our human experience from everything that I have come to put together through all different wisdom traditions all around the world, that this is where it comes down to, is that it is love. It is the unconditional love. And you don't have to like that person, but that love is what heals. That love is what shifts them. That love is what creates possibility for their shift. The compassion is that they, again, don't necessarily even know what they're doing. Or maybe they do know what they're doing, but you have compassion because the wound, the pain, the suffering that goes on within that person's life already, because a person who wants power, control, and manipulation wants to do it to others, is it because that has been done to them? And they want to rise up out of that to have their own. So we have compassion, for they don't necessarily understand the greater dynamic of all that entails, the karma that comes with that, right? And then even that forgiveness. Now, this is one that can be a little harder to tap into, but it's like, I forgive you. And again, we're going to talk even deeper about forgiveness. But forgiveness is not just a mindset, and it's not just a heart feeling. It goes into the soul. It's a combination of our body, of our heart, of our mind, our soul, which kind of then gives to that person that says, I forgive you for being where you're at in this lifetime, because the compassion allows me to feel for you and to give love to you so that maybe you can move yourself forward in a new way. Maybe you can choose your own healing at one time, and you can whether do it to the person that's incredibly cruel, or you do it to the person who's had the effect of the cruelty within the family. However, but this is where we're going to bring that connection, as we recognize, we expand our consciousness by recognizing how this works, right? So I invite you to take that into the world, take that into all that's happening. And so it's always a pleasure to bring this information to you guys. Do with it, invite it to inform you. It's gonna sink into you maybe in different ways, and that's all good, because everything is about your experience. Everything is about your connection and how you get connected. Now, again, if you would like to contact me in any way, you can reach me at andreadragonfly.com/media. That's my website, again, www. You can also and follow me on Facebook and Instagram at connected.dragonfly. And I am starting to move some of this stuff to my own YouTube channel at YouTube, which is just at Andrea. You have to put the @ Andrea Dragonfly, and then my stuff will start popping up. And again, if there's anything that you find of value in this, send it to friends, invite them to join in on and just getting this awesome information. So be well, take care. I hope to see you next week.
This has been Connected with your host, Andrea Dragonfly. Join Andrea each week on an extraordinary journey, exploring the consciousness of energy and how you are connected. Thursday, 9 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave TV network.